All right, we are on air. It is November 1st. Happy new month, everybody. This is a meeting to check in on active tasks related to community outreach and spreading the word about Backdrop CMS. So on our agenda, we do have a meta issue number 442 in the backdropcms.org queue that's specifically focused on improving our modules, themes, and layouts page. We ran into a couple of issues either in the summer or the training last week when people were going there to search for things in demos and couldn't get the result they wanted to come up. It occurs to me that there's a core issue in Backdrop that makes the search weighting not work that I ran into on one of my client sites, and I have a hack that sort of disables the thing that breaks it in core, that I should apply that same fix to backdropcms.org to make the search weighting work. And that'll probably help a little bit, but there is kind of a bigger issue about why search weighting doesn't work and why that feature's in there in the first place. So maybe if I apply that fix and put a link to that issue in the Gitter chat, some other people can help me take a look at it and figure out what the right fix is rather than just commenting out the thing that breaks searching. Just what I did on my client site. So I thought that might be a nice quick fix to make backdropcms.org work better while we work on all of the other things in 442 that'll improve the experience of selecting modules, themes, and layouts in Backdrop Core or on backdropcms.org. The next item here is the homepage demo link. And these are ideas that I think we talked about in last outreach meeting, but we also talked about them a lot at the Backdrop Summit last week. The short-term fix was to update the link on the homepage that used to say try a demo. We got a lot of feedback that that was confusing to people who didn't know what Pantheon was or who didn't have a Pantheon account. That when you clicked that link, you would get sent to a place that asked you to create an account. So I changed the text on that link right now to say install on Pantheon so that anyone who does know what Pantheon will at least know what's going to happen when they click on that link. But longer term, we do want to have a button there that says try a demo. And when you click on it, you want to be able to try a demo without having to go through all the hurdles of signing up for a Pantheon account. So we already have a view on the site that aggregates various different ways to install Backdrop, whether it's on Pantheon or Platform or using Docker or DDEV or Lando or whatever else. And so what we want to do is make the button on the homepage just say try a demo and take you to a demo site, and then have another link that says see other ways to install Backdrop and takes you to that page. And I think, Nate, when we left the Backdrop Summit last week, you had an idea for the demo site that was going to use Tugboat.
Yeah, so as an option, we could use Tugboat, which is Lullabot built product that we would be able to have like a perpetual, like a unlimited license to basically make it so that we could spin up any number of arbitrary sandboxes. And the sandboxes, we would need to decide how long they would last and configure them to spin down and things like that. But the idea being that we would like to make it so that creating a sandbox doesn't have any strings attached to it. Like Pantheon requires you to create an account, and then obviously they try to convert that over to being a paid account at some point in the future. But if we were to use something like Tugboat, it would be truly like one click, get a new sandbox that is yours. But it would have the downside of that it would be only available like for a set period of time, like a couple of days or something like that. And also wouldn't be convertible into a full website. So it would like truly be just a demo, basically.
I think that's probably what people want. So would that be everybody who clicks a link gets their own demo site? So you would have like 8 people click on it at once and there would be 8 different sites that were spun up?
Right.
Do you know how much time it takes to do that? Because one of the things I really hate about installing on Pantheon is how long it takes to get the demo going. Whereas we had something like demo module, they just like click the button and be on the site and there wouldn't be any like create time there.
Yeah, so it's very fast. The way or Tugboat is intended to be a sandbox creation tool, the same way that we use Zen CI for creating our sandboxes when we create a pull request. And normally what it does is it doesn't clone the container. It does something really strange where it already has a container basically there, and it makes like a weird like alias of it. So you're actually using the same container every time, and then there's a layer on top of it where it applies the difference of the pull request. So when it does a pull request, it takes about 4 minutes, I think. But I think it would be faster because there won't be any differences for it to apply. It'll just be reusing the same one every time. So I'm gonna have to see how fast that is, but it's gonna be less than 4 minutes, I think, to spin one up, which still isn't lightning fast, but it is probably less time than a Pantheon site. And the site would already be installed, which would be different than Pantheon where you have to install it after it's been spun up.
Okay. And then how would we communicate login credentials to people for that site?
Well, okay, I'm getting too elaborate here. What would really be ideal would be if when you click the spin up a demo button, it would give you some kind of progress indicator saying like, you know, okay, I'm currently setting up your site. And on that page, it would also, like we could put like a video or something like that that was like the marketing demo that's like, hey, here's some stuff about Backdrop. And on the page when the site is ready, it would also say the credentials, like here's your username and password.
And Tugboat do all of that?
So we would need to do the effort of showing a page that says, okay, we're spinning up a Tugboat site for you.
Okay.
And we can
print the username and password on it.
Right. Yep.
And Tugboat will tell us what the username and password is, or do we tell Tugboat what the username and password is?
We tell Tugboat.
Okay. So one thing I was thinking about that we could do too is that if we could have the install whatever, like randomly set a username and password and print them into a block or something on every spin up, that could be one way that we wouldn't need to have like an intermediary step.
Oh, interesting.
So it would just be like, here's your site, and then the password would be like to log in, whatever, and then the login block is right below the thing that says username and password. But that means we'd have to just sync that config file for the homepage or whatever default layout, whatever it is that's there.
Anyway, yeah, we've got things to work out there. I don't know. It's just an idea at this point.
For Tugboat, is there any hosting costs associated with that?
No.
Okay, because
we would not incur any, at least. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I would like to bring this up as well. So here in Australia, we're building the new version, the 8th version for GovCMS, which is a big thing, and we are also building training material, and we would like people to follow along. So we were looking at Simply Test Me, which is something that a lot of people use, and it's frustrating how for maybe a couple of years now it has a lot of issues, like especially distributions are not being spun up properly. It fails. So Simply Test Me is actually a project in d.org. So anyone who wants to build a similar platform, in theory, has the code to do it. And there was a problem with reaching the original maintainer because he didn't have time anymore. He moved along, so he didn't want to work on it. So they found a new maintainer, and there were companies that volunteered to offer time resources, but that ticket has not been updated since January, I think. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning it is because people are already familiar with Simply Test Me, and if we had any resources to put on actually getting it to work again, I don't know. They also offer, like, there's a section at the bottom while the build is being done that where sponsors can put their logos, and this is something for, like, I don't know if we have a budget for that, but it's sort of like a promotional thing. I'm not saying that do that instead of Tugboat, because I was looking into Tugboat the other day. I didn't know it was a Lullabot thing. That's good to know. But I'm saying an additional thing, which is also, it doesn't require you to log in, to create an account. And at the end of it, it just logs you in. So there's no step where you are required to add their username and password. I think only the D8 version of it would require you to do that, but it was because it was actually at the end of the process, it was going through the installation process of D8 as well. That's where the bit where the credentials were being added was not automated.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting idea. We could just not install it, right? And then let the user set their username and password.
Which was another thing. So people might at the point we didn't have the ZenCI thing, and when I was trying to sort issues related to the installer, there was no way for me to check and simply test me the installation steps. So if I wanted to troubleshoot something in the installation, it was all skipped together. I was just taken to. So we need to decide what is the target audience, I guess. Would it be people that would be interested in seeing the installation process, or we just need something that people sort of like a one-button, one-click solution that logs people in? I think the second.
Yeah, I think so too. I think in this case, it is like an evaluation tool, and we shouldn't be showing them like the developer experience of like what it's like to install. I think we can just show them editor experience of like you're logged in. This is what it's like to edit existing content. Where we aren't even giving them like, you know, it should be a finished site that they're getting when they're done.
The good thing with Simply Test Me was that you could also use parameters in the URL, so you can create links in module pages that will actually spin up an instance with core and that module or modules or patches included. I don't think we have that problem with Backdrop because we have the installer, the project browser. So all we need to worry about is core.
Yeah. I do like, Polonos, though, your recommendation about in Simply Test Me. If there's a way we can sponsor the project, then anybody who's using Simply Test Me would be able to find out about Backdrop.
Yeah.
And that's kind of an interesting marketing angle, regardless of whether we're going to use that tool or not. So that's definitely something I hadn't thought of before. And
I strongly remember in my head there was a logo of Druid for some point. I think they were sponsoring the whole Simply Test Me thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just as an alternative thing.
Yeah, also, just the tie-in here, Matt Westgate, who's the Lullabot CEO, has been talking with Adam Bergstein, who's the guy that took over Simply Test Me, about potentially collaborating, but I don't think Adam is interested in going down that approach. But Lullabot has also made the offer to Drupal.org, saying we could also be the sandbox builder for Drupal.org. And the potential is greater there in the future with Drupal.org switching over to GitLab, because they'll have the ability to use Tugboat directly that way. So, so there may actually be a future where Tugboat actually ends up kind of being integrated with Drupal.org as well. The offer has been put out there, but they haven't really shown a lot of enthusiasm on taking it up. So, yeah.
Yeah, in that ticket where the transition of the project maintainer happened, there were a lot of people that I didn't know back then that are actually in GovCMS, like in the government here, that were involved in the discussions, and also Chris Snitchell, Michael Snitchell from Amazy, which they also offer a platform where you can spin up instances, and they were interested to help as well. Mm-hmm. As I said, there's no, after the changing the maintainer and finding a more responsive person was step one, but there was no step two after that.
Yep. Yeah, and I asked Adam how it was going with Simply Test Me, and it was like nebulous. So
yeah.
Nate, do you think there would be any motivating factor for someone at Lullabot responsible for Tugboat to do the setup of Backdrop's demo site for us? Like if they could brand it at the bottom like demo provided by Tugboat or something, is that like a marketing angle that would make it worthwhile for them to do the work for us?
Well, I'm not sure, because so they've already actually set up Backdrop with Tugboat. It's one of their templates. So you can already spin up a backdrop site, or at least use the template, create an account, hook it up to Backdrop's repo, and then use a template to, say, install Backdrop, basically. And that's kind of as far as Tugboat, like, that's as far as Tugboat would take it normally. Like, we'll have to do the work of like creating a page that shows the username and password, or generates the username and password, and does things of that nature, because that'll actually be on backdropcms.org, that portion of things.
So how far are we from having a link you click that people can see a Backdrop site? Like, what are the steps remaining to do that?
So, okay, so the trick here is that something needs to kick off Tugboat to create a sandbox, and typically that's a pull request.
Okay.
And so it's made to work by getting a pull request, and then it spins up a Tugboat instance. But because we're clicking a button, not spinning up a Tugboat, or not spinning up a pull request, we would need to make the API call to Tugboat that says create a new sandbox when the button is clicked. So we would need to, on backdropcms.org, give it an API key, and then have it trigger a REST request to Tugboat to say, create a new instance.
Okay, so that could be done pretty easily with a custom module and a page callback, and as long as we have the credentials in there. So that's like half an hour of work maybe. But what do we do when we get the response?
So yeah, we would need to say start up a new request, and then we would get back like, this is the sandbox instance, and then we'd probably have to do polling, like, like check, is the sandbox ready? Is the sandbox ready? Is the sandbox ready? And then,
okay,
yes,
so we'd have to have like
ready.
a loading screen or something, and that's where in theory we could eventually put a video or what have you. And then when it's ready, we would do like a Backdrop go to, or do you want to iframe it in, or what's the?
Yeah, Backdrop go to, I would say, like, just take, or show them a link that's like, it's not ready, visit the sandbox,
Your demo is ready.
Yeah.
All right. Is there a way we can test that process to see how long it takes before we commit to writing all of this code? Because if it's going to be like Pantheon, we probably wouldn't want to pursue this route and instead use one of the other methods we talked about. And I don't want to put in a bunch of work to like writing that.
Yeah.
Tugboat. Yeah,
the trivial thing to do is to clone the Backdrop repo, put it in a new repository that's like just a custom, like, hey, I've got a random website repository, and then hook it up to Tugboat, and then see how long it takes to make an instance.
Okay.
Via GitHub, like make a pull request and see how fast it is, and that
Can
would
you
give
get me a Tugboat API key to do that? I'll create an issue.
Sure.
I would like to take the opportunity to confess the way that I am abusing ZenCI. So I have a pull request that I say, please do not touch this, and all it's there, it's just a dot added in the README file just to get me a sandbox. So that's my easy way of, if I want to present something to people and they register a Backdrop, that's my easy way. I just close the pull request, reopen it, get a fresh sandbox. So I don't know if we could get something similar and disguise it beautifully. That would be perfect. Like, if there is a roadblock which requires us to file a pull request, it can just be a dot in the README file, just as a hack or something.
Yeah, I have an option here for using ZenCI in that way with a fake pull request. And then if we had some GitHub API call that's like close open, we would just need to like find a way to read the username and password or the password it generates for that new sandbox site. But the downside to that is that we only get Backdrop core. And I think for a compelling demo, we want a completed website. Like, we wanted to have modules and themes and content. So I think like for now, if we can get that going in like 5 minutes, that's a win. But I think long term, we should pursue something like Tugboat where we can have like a starting database and a starting code base that's more complete. So, and we could do that with ZenCI in theory too, but I think it would be just as much setup, if not more. Okay. Whew. So yeah, we need to fix the demo situation. We have lots of ideas and lots of work to do. But let's table the rest of that discussion for after we've made a little more progress and see how things are going.
Just saying that, also mentioning that Crane and Kevin seems to be proficient with the GitHub API thing. So maybe if he has some capacity, he can help.
Let me just jump in and say too, that in terms of like my self-help, I'm not going to be the one to write the API stuff or something like this, but if there was a way I could be helpful, what I found that with the last release, having a Saturday with a time where I could schedule a couple hours and people were expecting me meant I was more likely to help out with it. This is a task I'd love to help out with, but I'm much more likely to do it if we say, hey, let's work on this at X time on X day, and preferably on a weekend, unfortunately, because my weeks are just too busy right now. But that's
how it works.
Right. If you give me let's sprint on this issue on this day.
Well, one thing I think might be really helpful to have you work on, Tim, is if you have a good site that would be a good example site, it might be really valuable to have you spend some time like cleaning it up and making it like public friendly. And we could do that where you could have access to whatever repo we're working on, and you put in all of your code and your themes and clean up content in the database or what have you. And then if someone else is working on setting up the front piece, that might be a good way. Then you can log in when it's done and be like, is it doing the things it's supposed to do? And because you're doing a lot of work on backdrop sites, you might have some good candidates for an example site we could use for that.
Sure. But again, like
I agree.
Scheduling that would be helpful for me.
Yes. I'm not going to know my schedule this weekend, but next weekend, I'm going to be free for most of the day. So maybe let's you and I touch base after this call and see if we can set something up.
It wouldn't absolutely have to be on a weekend. It could be on a weekday, but weekends generally work better.
Okay.
For this kind of thing.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. Moving on, past demos. The next thing we need to do to tell people about Backdrop is write more blog posts. So I think the most urgent one we need to do is a BADCamp wrap up. I don't know. There were a lot of people there. I want to see if maybe Mike or Jack or Wes wants to do one of those. But if nobody has time, I could take a stab at it. We also need to do a couple of emails about the Conservancy. Those are sort of on Nate's plate at the moment. We had a couple of security issues recently, so if we wanted to do a more in-depth blog post about Backdrop's security process, we could do that. We also got a question via email recently about requirements to be on Backdrop's security team, and I think that might be worth putting on our security page. Just like, how does someone end up on the security team? And so far, it's been like anyone who specifically asked, and then we said, oh yeah, you know, we know you based on your reputation, either in what you've been doing in Backdrop or what you've been doing in Drupal, and that has made you valuable to us, and so you got added that way. Or people that we have reached out and asked and said, hey, I noticed you're doing work on these issues. Would you like to be involved in the security team? And sometimes they say yes. But I don't know if we should have a more strict process for like, these are the requirements for people to be on our security team, so that new people coming in have that clarity into how things work, which I think could be valuable. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts in writing that down, but that would probably be valuable. And then posting it on our website once we know what our requirements are would be good. And then we could write a blog post about security issues in general and our security team more specifically.
Yeah, there was a person that was not within the Drupal Backdrop community that did an audit or something, like recently, wasn't it?
We had a couple people. I think they're just generally wanting to contribute to open source and doing a bunch of checking for common security issues on various interfaces. And not our most recent security release, the one that's coordinated with Drupal, but the one before that was somebody who just found a problem and reported it through normal channels, and we were able to get it fixed. So we're actually really grateful to those people who are doing those kind of audits on Backdrop. And if we can have someone like that who wants to be on our team, who maybe isn't an avid Backdrop user, but is very familiar with common security exploits, that would also be great. So we need to make sure we've got a way in our security team to allow people like that to be involved.
Jen, since I see the Conservancy being mentioned in the agenda, I was watching the video from BADCamp where you presented, like with our slides. I think that might be worth adding to our slides. That we
Okay.
have just an idea.
What do you mean adding to our slides?
Just the
Oh,
fact
just
that
the security team part?
no, the conservancy bit, adding it to the slides. I don't know if it's like worth mentioning.
Ah, okay. Yeah, like maybe when I'm near the PMC section where it's like who's in charge of Backdraft, we can say that we're part of this episode. That's a great idea. Can you write that down somewhere, like even just in Gitter, so I don't forget?
I think we have a repo for the slides, so
We do.
So
That would be great.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Other ideas for blog posts include integrations with external services, things that could be module integrations. So if we do get this tugboat thing, that could be kind of cool. Also, there's a Fastly module. We want to port that to Backdrop. Other stuff like Civi CRM is getting a lot of attention right now. So if anyone's doing anything cool with Backdrop and Civi, we could write something up about that. Basically anything anyone's working on that's cool and you want to share, it's always good. We also have this continuing community spotlight. I haven't had a check-in with the folks over at Facet Interactive in a while, but I know that they had some improvements to the questions that we should ask our community members, and they were willing to take over the interview and write up the process for doing community spotlights for us. So I will shoot them an email and see if they're interested in doing that, because I think if we can get community spotlights to sort of fill the voids when we're not actively writing blog posts on other things, that would just be a good, healthy thing to do for our community to make sure everybody knows how many amazing, fantastic people we have in our midst. Backdrop 1.2 is going to be out in January. We'll have a newsletter about that, as well as a blog post. But yeah, anything else anyone feels is valuable to share with our Backdrop community, we should definitely get more blog posts out there. So I think right now anyone with a backdropcms.org can draft a blog post, but nobody is doing so. So if anyone has any ideas on how to solicit content from people, it's something that's really hard, particularly as a developer community. We're not very good at doing content, but I think that in the world of Backdrop, we're going to have a lot more people who are don't consider themselves developers, who might be looking for ways to contribute that aren't code related, and writing blog posts, I think, is a great way to do it. Maybe here's an idea on the contribute page. We could specifically put a call out to like add a showcase or write a blog post on backdropcms.org's website. It could be a good way to do it. Just gonna write a note here.
So sorry I didn't make Bad Camp. One of the things we talked about maybe doing at Bad Camp was talking a little bit about an outreach plan. Just like scheduling things helps me, any kind of structure. So one of the things we talked about in terms of having an outreach plan was some specific goals that we could check in with, like at these meetings, like, hey, our goal is to do, you know, a blog post every 2 weeks. What have we done this week? We haven't done one this week. And for some reason, that little change from just what we're doing now might help motivate me, because it's not just, oh, you know, we want to do more blog posts. Is anybody going to do them? But it's like, hey, we're behind, or we had a goal and we haven't met it. So
that's great. I just had an idea. You know how we use milestones for Backdrop, the main project? What if we used milestones on the backdropcms.org repo for managing things like blog post or content creation? And then we could schedule, like, we want to have, you know, one showcase and one blog post every month or every 2 weeks in case of blog posts or whatever we think we can do. And then we can assign them to various people. We can choose topics. I think that would be a better, I mean, I don't know if GitHub's the best way to manage blog post content, but I'm trying to think of some way that we could have like dates associated with things rather than just, I mean, having this meeting talk about them is good, but I think you're right, like having a way to actively write down what it is we're supposed to do and who's going to do it and when it needs to be done is good.
Right.
So what do you think? Should we start with milestones and see if that works just for this month? And then if it fails, we can try and do something else, whether it's like Google Calendar, I don't know.
I personally haven't used milestones much with GitHub, but it sounds like it's worth trying. So, yeah.
Okay. I do like that idea.
And I have a specific idea that could turn into a blog post that I'm ready to mention in a minute.
Okay.
And not that my name has been mentioned in others as well that I've never done, but.
Okay. So how about this? Since we have this meeting every 2 weeks, usually, I don't know about like Thanksgiving, we might not have one, but in general, why don't we use every meeting to assign a blog post to someone for the next 2 weeks? Maybe we should assign 2. And then we can be like, this one we need in 2 weeks and this one we need in 4 weeks. And then in 2 weeks we can check in and be like, did this one get done or did the next one get done? And then that way we, like, if somebody doesn't get one done, but the other person gets another one done, we can sort of shuffle them.
Right.
So I think that would be good. Okay. So for today, we have this next blog post thing.
I think it's also just helpful to like ask somebody else, hey, we need a blog post on X date. Can you write it? As opposed to just saying, can you write one sometime? So.
Okay. So today is November 1st. So tomorrow's the 2nd. What day did we decide what day it was best to publish blog posts? I think whenever it's ready, it's fine. But I would love to choose a date. How about we choose Thursday? And then that way, if we have like a slip day, we could do it on Friday for some reason, if necessary. Okay, so today's the 1st. 2 days from now would be the 8th, 15th. So let's see if we can get a Bad Camp post up before November 15th. And then Tim's idea.
Unknown idea.
By November 30th.
Do tell which idea. What idea is that?
So my colleague David and I undertook maintaining a module for Backdrop. And we don't have experience with this with Drupal 7. We've started down the road. You know, we've been officially approved and all of that, but I would have a few questions about that. And I was thinking about just scheduling like a Google Hangout at some point with somebody, with Greg or somebody who does a lot of Backdrop module maintaining stuff, and just asking a bunch of questions, having sort of an intro to.
Yeah, I don't do. I'm not a maintainer of any module, but I'm there to do the queues because I am the person who is meant to be checking the queues for approval.
Okay.
I've not been very diligent lately, and what I've asked for others, because I lack time, is just if you see an application there and it's not being reacted in a long time, just ping me in Gitter. Gitter is the best.
And I said your name, but I didn't actually mean you. But Jeff, I was thinking of Jeff. Or somebody like that, because I know Jeff. But I was thinking, you know, if I could schedule a meeting with somebody, we could ask a bunch of questions. I think there could be a great blog post out of that. That would be sort of a wrap up. And I'd like to do that very soon. I mean, things like, just to give you an example, one of the questions is, we have feature ideas, and my colleague is like, well, do we have any obligation or try to backport things to, or at least apply patches to Drupal? Is that like a goal? Is that something that's part of the Backdrop way of doing it? It's like, I don't know. We should ask some folks that are thinking about this. So I'd love to just schedule a half hour, well, probably an hour at some point, and it doesn't have to be another thing for you and Nate Chen, but somebody that's doing a lot of contrib stuff that would be willing to answer our questions, and that we could publicize it too, as if you're interested in maintaining as sort of a special webinar or something.
Yeah, that sounds great.
And just keep it, you know, I'm not trying to make anything too complicated. Just schedule a time, use a Google Hangout. We could record it. It might be a resource that other people could use later. Plus, then I would commit myself to writing a blog post about summing up what we learned. Does that make sense? Does that sound useful?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
I would say, I'm not sure how many people are watching these, like from the active members in the community are watching these recordings. But I would say that you have good chances if you post something on Gitter that somebody sees you,
right,
and reacts, or even filing a ticket for that,
yep,
and pointing people to it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to commit. I think this is sort of an outreach thing because it's getting, but I'm going to commit myself to talking to, identifying some people to do this with me, and just go ahead and schedule a time and get this going.
Sounds good.
I'll certainly look at the suggested topics, and with that, the same kind of incentive of a deadline and a well-defined topic. If there's one there now, like I've got bandwidth right now, I would go at it. But that's an ongoing thing. So
easy to pick tasks is like community spotlights. Just pick a person and write about them. I think we only had one or two, Jen, so far. I think there was one for Jeff, and I don't remember how many spotlights we had.
Yeah, I think that might have been it before we got busy with other things. Okay. Next on the agenda is Backdrop Planet. So we talked about this 2 weeks ago. We done an original Twitter poll, and it turns out we had a bunch of people who are interested in subscribing to a Backdrop Planet, which is great. I did another Twitter poll to see if people would be interested in creating content, and there was an awful lot of silence. So I think it might be good to, if we can get Tim's idea of a content schedule going, one of the things we could do for the Backdrop Planet is use our own blog post to seed that feed. And even if we only have 1 or 2 posts coming out every week or so, that might be, 1 every 2 weeks might be a good place to start, maybe in January if we get this thing going. And then as people start seeing content appearing in their inboxes or their feed readers or however it is they're managing it, they'll start to see that as an avenue where they could use it for their own marketing on Backdrop, and it might begin to grow that way. So I think this is one of these things where if we build it, they will come. Right now, if we ask people if they're doing it, they're going to say no because there's no incentive to do it. So I think, starting with doing our own blog posts is a good way to go. And once we get those rolling out regularly, I think setting up a plan is a good idea because we know there's people that want the content, and then I think the content will come. So I was thinking to kind of set up a start date for that around January. And if we can get our act together with creating blog posts now and have a schedule and stick to it, then in January it should be no big deal to just kind of roll with our own stuff in there. All right. Newsletter. I don't think we sent out one newsletter, which was the most recent version of Backdrop Highlights. Tim, was it you that wrote that blog post? We got a lot of really good feedback on the blog post that went up that showcased all the highlights in Backdrop 111. And in particular, the screenshots were super valuable. So it did a really good job of showcasing all the neat stuff that Backdrop does now.
Mostly I copied and pasted the README file, but I did the screenshots. So yeah.
There you go. Everybody loved the screenshots.
Well, I did animal pictures, so.
Yeah. And then let's see, other newsletter things. Anything that we have a good blog post about, I think would be a good tie into a newsletter. If it's a relevant topic where we can send a whole newsletter about it, we can do that. But also if it's just a little highlight, we could send it as like a section of a larger newsletter. Videos. We have a couple of ideas for videos. We also have our content strategy map that outlines a couple of things that we could do videos on. In general, I think we just need more videos about how to do stuff on Backdrop. So if anyone is doing something and you find kind of a cool 5-minute thing, and you're like, oh, this is really neat, I should show people that. Having a 5-minute video that highlights that could be really valuable, Twitter-worthy, blog post-worthy, anything like that. That we can show people what Backdrop does, especially if it's something that's different from Drupal or any other CMS. Tweets. I don't know what's going on in the world right now that we need to promote, but we have a Twitter queue we can add stuff to. Tim, I think you're also on the Twitter, so if you see anything going on in the world that is relevant, we can definitely jump in on that. If no one has anything urgent, we will just kind of keep reading, see what's going on. And then mentions. So trying to get Backdrop mentioned elsewhere on the web. We talked about earlier in this meeting, Simply Test Me might be a good place to do some promotion. If anyone sees anything else like that, where it's a good opportunity to get Backdrop on the eyes of existing users, particular Drupal 7, now that Drupal 7 has an end of life announced and it's so easy to get from Drupal 7 to Backdrop, a Drupal 7 audience could be really valuable. One thing that I've been getting a lot of spam lately where people are trying to sell me sets of email addresses of Drupal users. And I've just been kind of archiving those emails or what have you, but I don't know if there's any value to setting up an email list with purchased email addresses where we could target them and say, Nate's shaking his head. Are you interested in Backdrop? Why? Do you think these are like stolen email addresses? Is this super sketchy?
Yeah, you shouldn't be encouraging anybody selling, like cold calling to sell email addresses.
They're
That's
not
not
calling, they're cold emailing, but all right, well, even if it's not those people, the idea of like we could get an email list, perhaps from a legitimate source. I don't know what a legitimate source is for email addresses. I haven't ever bought them, but I hear they exist. No, everyone's got heebie-jeebies about that. Okay, well.
I don't.
I find it unethical. I don't know.
You don't have heebie-jeebies?
I'm more on the fence, but
yeah.
I find it unethical and also intrusive for the people that like they haven't subscribed. You don't know if these people, like the end users, have subscribed or people have somehow come across these lists and are abusing them to make profit out of it.
That's why I think there must be some like legitimate source of like, oh, send me information about Drupal, and then you fill out a form, and then someone like sells that email address to people can like tell you about Drupal. I don't know. People tell you about Backdrop. You didn't want to know about Backdrop, but you asked about Drupal. All right, I'm getting the heebie-jeebies now too. All right.
That's a little yeah, ideal how ideally this works, but I don't think anyways.
Maybe the more ethical way to do this would be to find a partner with a list that, with crossover appeal, that's been a legitimate opt-in. There's a legitimate tie-in, and we have something to offer them. Maybe.
Yeah, I think like a CiviCRM group might be good, right? Where you're Drupal, are you interested in learning about Backdrop? Yes, no, and then if they say yes, we can tell them. Yeah, that's much better. No heebie-jeebies there. That's great. Okay, so we can Civi partnership. Okay. Other things, events. Yay, BADCamp happened. So just a quick recap. We had a summit on Wednesday, and we had a massive number of signups. We had, I think, 35 people who signed up to attend. So when we got there in the morning, I was like, oh my gosh, that's every chair in this room. I was really worried about volume, but in typical BADCamp style, if you have a free event, a whole bunch of people sign up and then they don't show up. So we ended up having plenty of room in the room. But even that said, we went around the room in the morning and we asked everybody what they were interested in getting out of it. And we had a couple of people that were curious about Backdrop, open-minded, but not yet sold. And by the end of the day, almost everybody who wasn't sure about Backdrop was sure that they loved Backdrop, which was great. There was one person who thought it was going to be more similar to Drupal 8. And at the very beginning of the day, we're like, you might not be in the right place. And sure enough, by lunchtime, he's like, I'm going to go to the other summit. And we're like, yeah, that's probably. He's like, I'm doing this crazy headless project with React, and I want to know if it's easier with Backdrop. And we're like, no, that's probably not going to be any easier. I don't know if it was React. It was something like that. But yeah, everybody else, for the most part, was really surprised about all of the new features we've been continuing to add and all the improvements that went in. And we had a really good community discussion in the afternoon where we kind of all formed a circle, and Jack did a really good job of leading it and keeping us on track and making sure that everybody's desires of what they wanted to talk about were addressed. And I just kind of left feeling really reinvigorated by everything that was achieved throughout the day. And then the next day we did an all-day Backdrop training, and one of the people who was in the summit signed up for the training and brought his partner to the training too. So that was really great that we had someone that was so sold that they needed to learn more, which was fantastic. The training was full. We got a really tiny room, but we packed it full of people, which was great. We had a little technical trouble in the issue in the morning. There was no projector in there we could use, so Nate had to run home and grab our spare projector, but it worked out okay. We ended up not organizing the event to go all day long. And so we ended up just pushing the schedule back half an hour, and it worked out great. We had a lot of people who learned a lot of new stuff in the training too. So that went well. And then let's see, we had Friday off, which was great. We got to just kind of hang out with our friends. And then on Saturday, we gave 2 talks. We gave one talk in the morning, which was the philosophy. It was the first session on the day after the party. And so when we asked in the room if anyone had attended a party, everybody said no, which is what we expected. All the people who were at the party did not make the first session. But it was still pretty good. We had a bunch of curious people in there. And then in the afternoon, we had our demo talk, and that was much more well attended. All the people who had survived the party did make the afternoon session slot. So there were a lot of people who I think hadn't seen what had been going on in Backdrop and were pretty convinced that it's been continuing to move forward. So that was great. And we had a bunch of really good questions too. So overall, I felt like the conference went really well. We changed a bunch of minds. We showed a bunch of people stuff they didn't know about. And yeah, we told everybody to go tell all their friends when they left about everything that's going on in Backdrop. Nate, do you have anything you want to add to how Bad Camp went?
Yeah, we have a new presentation that's in the slides repository now. That's the 5-year history of Backdrop that could be reused by anybody interested in giving an overview of the history of Backdrop. It's pretty epic. It's 73 slides, and I thought that I thought it would take like 2 hours to get through it, but it actually turns out that once we get into rolling through all of the screenshots and the various releases, that we did it in just about exactly an hour. So it's a good hour-long presentation that we now have another one at our disposal. And one of the great things about it is that it's pretty much entirely new. There's hardly any reused information from any previous presentation in it. So it's a nice new deck to use.
Yeah, that was great. So that was something that we realized we were going to be giving the philosophy talk like once in the summit and once in the training and once as a session. And we're like, that's not going to be valuable for people who are interested in Backdrop. They don't want to see the same thing 3 times, even if it's long format, short format. And so I had listed on the session Backdrop past and future, and Nate kind of ran with that idea and made the whole talk is in sequence of time. It was like, this is the date we forked, and this is the date we released, and this is what happened when we upgraded backdropcms.org, and everything's in order, and it shows the entire progression of all of the new features and all of the infrastructure that got added around the project as well. So it includes like the creation of the project management committee and the localized website and all of the stuff that the project needs to be successful. So I think that was also really compelling for people who were not really involved in Backdrop or maybe hadn't been paying attention to what we've been doing for 5 years, which is most people, just kind of see it all laid out like that. So yeah, thanks Nate for doing all the work on that topic. And it turns out that if you let me talk, I talk much faster than Nate, and it's not a problem to go through 75 slides in an hour. But yeah, it was, there's a lot of great content in there, and there's a bunch of good screenshots and animations of all of the neat stuff that went into recent versions. Okay, upcoming events, you can go to backdropcms.org/news/events or just /events. In a couple weeks, we have the Nonprofit Software Development Summit or Developer Summit, which is here in Oakland. It's not Backdrop specific. It's very freeform. We will probably talk about Backdrop, but there may not be a designated session, so to speak. Then there will be Drupal South, which is December 3rd. I don't know if you've heard anything about whether there's going to be a session there or not about Backdrop, but there will be hallway conversations.
That would certainly be. It's just that we have this big project that we won as a company, as an agency, and there's like 6 sessions I think we're presenting. So it was sort of like imposed to me to not add more to that, so we have more chances to present our work. And fair enough, maybe next year, but there will be talks.
Okay. And then in January, we have a bunch of Backdrop birthday parties scheduled, which will probably be sort of a show and tell rather than a session. But that could be fun for people who are curious about what Backdrop is up to these days. All right. Other things.
By the way, something I forgot about Drupal South, the person that was, I don't know what you call them, the volunteers that help you out when you are presenting, is this year presenting on Wix and WordPress compared to Drupal and what they're doing better. They had a session. So maybe a week ago, I offered like, I said something like along the way, hey, it's been a couple of years since I last presented and we've come along the way. If you want to add Backdrop to that session, just let me know. But I didn't hear from them. But there will be a session about other things than Drupal, which I am going to attend and try to shamelessly plug Backdrop.
There you go.
There you go.
We are at time. It is 1 o'clock and we need to get started on our developer meeting. So let's go ahead and wrap this, and any further thoughts you guys have, we can throw into the dev meeting. But I want to get going on that one. All right, well, thanks everybody for attending. That was kind of a great brainstorm. So I look forward to implementing some of those ideas. All right, see you on the other hangout.